Welcome back to this glorious Tuesday, Raider Nation. I hope you're having a great day. Welcome back to Silver and Black today, Odyssey Sports original podcast covering the Las Vegas Raiders. I'm your host, Scott Branson. My co-host, my friend along the path always when it comes to Raiders football is my good friend Mo Moten. He's a senior NFL writer at Bleacher Report, also the Raiders columnist at sportsnot.com. You can follow him on X at Mo Moten, Moemoton. You can follow me at LV Gully. The show is SNB Today. Do us a favor, subscribe to the show wherever you get your audio. If you're watching us on YouTube, hit that subscribe notifications bell as well. You got to do both of those things and then give us a thumbs up if you like the content. We certainly appreciate that. We're back talking Raiders football. We got a lot to talk about today, actually. Yes, I know. It seems like there's nothing going on, but the Raiders have been busy. They've signed a couple players, so we have roster moves to talk about. We have roster moves they maybe need to make that they haven't made yet. See, patience is a virtue. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. We'll also talk about a couple other things. Number two, the schedule's coming out here this week, later this week. At least that's what the NFL says. Although now I'm hearing things that it might be next week. Who knows? The NFL is trying to make it a big secret and then is going to just throw it at us so that we get all excited about it. So we'll see what happens there. The other thing I want to talk about a little bit too is had a couple Raiders change numbers. We'll talk about that. We'll also talk about Josh Jacobs. Does he owe you anything? Does he owe you anything? Does he owe you a goodbye letter? Does he owe you a goodbye tweet or an Instagram? We're going to talk about that as that has been a subject of conversation within Raider Nation. So we're going to talk about that later in the show as well. All right, Mo, let's jump in on this. The Raiders have made a couple roster moves over the last week. Of course, they signed wide receiver Jalen Guyton. Not surprising. Tom Telesco fined, of course, when he took him and signed him to the Chargers. And Jalen Guyton had a pretty good year back in 2020 and hurt his knee. And so he's been trying to come back from that knee injury. But he signs a receiver he's familiar with to strengthen that room, to bring in more competition. They signed Michael Gallup last week, of course. Then on Monday, and usually we record this the day before. We're recording the same day as release, so we're here on Tuesday morning. And Andrus Peat, the offensive tackle, really, although he played guard most of his career, moved outside to tackle last year with the Saints. The Raiders signed him, so they continue to bring in some more bodies on the offensive line. Mo, let's start with the second one first, and that's Andrus Peat. He's billed in the headlines as a Pro Bowler. He's had some trouble. He was not doing that great on the inside, which he was a guard. He played a guard, made the Pro Bowl, everything. They move him outside. He does better on the outside for the Saints last year. And now the Raiders bring him in here. And for me, here's my question for you. I still think even signing him, what they've done with the draft, what we know that they like Thayer Munford Jr., I still think that right tackle position going into camp is a big competition, and we don't know who's going to win, and I think it's up for grabs.
I think it's up for grabs. As you said, Peat moved outside the tackle last year for the Saints. They needed him out on the outside. He was a multi-time Pro Bowl left guard early in his career, former first-round pick as well in 2015, I believe. Mm-hmm. So the potential was there when he came out of college to the Saints. Had some struggles after his Pro Bowl years. We'll see if he can get his feet back under him wherever the Raiders decide to play him. I would assume he's going to compete at multiple positions because at training camp, at these mini camps, these offensive linemen have to cross-train anyway. But you mentioned the right tackle position, which has been the question mark position because we pretty much know that Dylan Parham is going to start. We assume that Jackson Powers-Johnson is going to start at the other guard position. So you would assume that maybe Peat plays tackle, challenges Thayer Munford Jr. Because as I said, I've been saying this whole offseason that I wouldn't just give Thayer Munford the job. I know there are a lot of Thayer Munford supporters watching us and listening to us right now. It's all about competition in the spring and summer. You don't want to just if a guy hasn't established himself as a starter, you don't just hand him the starting job because he did well in fill-in duty. And I know that's talked about a lot with Thayer Munford Jr., but I think Peat coming in as a veteran is a good competitor for the spot. Usually with training camp, you usually have a young guy who's coming up and you want to challenge that young guy. If he's ready to take over the starting position, usually put him against a veteran and you see who's the best. Whoever the best man wins gets the job.
Right. And it's interesting. And I'm looking, and you wrote last week a piece on Tom Telesco building the roster and you wrote before the draft about his draft history and kind of how because we can learn from people. People have patterns, right? As professionals, we understand what they do. So I think that what Tom Telesco has done fits what he's done in the past. What's interesting to me about this offensive line situation, Mo, is it's I don't know that they feel that they have to have a bona fide right tackle, because I look at it and I see they signed Peat, and you could look at him as a swing guy. You can look at DJ Glaze, who they've drafted, as a swing guy. Okay. Then you can look at Mumford as a swing guy. You have Parham, who can play center, but they just signed Andre James, so he's going to stay at guard. I'm questioning whether or not, remember, Parham came under the other regime. They drafted him. So maybe they have questions at left guard. And so now Peat comes in and he's there in case you need him there. Then I wrote a piece up on Sportsnaut yesterday about Andrew Coker. And the more I've been watching now, I'm going through individually all the different draft picks and a couple of the undrafted free agents. Andrew Coker would have been a draft pick. He gets hurt his last year, has a great career at TCU, gets hurt last year and misses time, doesn't play as well as he had, especially when TCU went on that magical run to the national championship game. And I think he's in the mix as an undrafted free agent to compete. I'm not saying he's going to win it, to compete for that right tackle position. But the guys that they've brought in, with the exception of Powers Johnson, to me, are all swing guys. So I think they're going to try a bunch of different combinations and let everybody just go at it and battle and see who wins out.
Yeah, I agree with you. And that's what I think that's what you would want out of the offensive line group, simply because, as I've been saying, the best 5 on the field. Yeah. Whatever combination that is. And you just got to keep in mind with the Dylan Parham, while I think Dylan Parham starts, just keep in mind that Tom Telesco did not draft Dylan Parham. Exactly. So if that's, if there's a surprise to see at camp, it might be that Dylan Parham doesn't start. Now, again, I think Dylan Parham starts. But as we all know, when these GMs come in, they may have a different idea of what they want to see on the offensive line group. So I wouldn't lock Dylan Parham in, but I would say I would pencil him in there, and not in ink, but in pencil, and say that he's a probable starter. But the one thing about Peat is he's only played mostly on the left side. Now, he did play a little bit of right tackle as a rookie, right, but he's played mostly, for the most part, on the left side of the offensive line, left guard, left tackle. So if he's going to compete with Dan Mumford, that would mean that they believe that he has some position versatility where he can play both sides of the line and be a swing guy, as you mentioned. Now, I don't know if that's going to work out for him. He might wind up just being a depth piece, the first guy off the sideline for the guard position on the left side, just in case, maybe it's insurance, just in case Dylan Parham doesn't work out. Who knows? But as I said, best 5 on the field, whoever that may be. Colton Miller is probably the only. Colton Miller and Andre James are probably the only 2 locks, I would say. Right. Dylan Parham close. And then we hope that Jackson Powers Johnson is able to start right away as a second-round pick.
Right. And I think you hit on something there too, with the left side, with Peat primarily being a left side guy, is that Parham goes down, he can play guard, right? Okay, he had some trouble there, which is why they moved him outside, but still he can play there. You also have Colton Miller, remember, as you said, a lock to start there, best offensive lineman the Raiders have, but he's had some injuries last year, if you remember. He missed some time, so you need depth. And so I look at Peat and I say, yeah, I think he's a depth guy on the left side, which is great. No problems there whatsoever. You want to see your team build depth. And here's a guy who obviously has not played up to his Pro Bowl caliber earlier in his career, but he's still a solid guy, and you need those people, especially with some of the folks the Raiders said goodbye to. So I look at that, and then I look at the right side, and like I said, I think it's an open competition, and I really like Coker, man. You try not to get personally like invested in somebody, but man, watching his film up until last year when he had the injuries, and he's solid, man. He's really good. He could surprise on that right side. If not, he's at least depth. Then you have DJ Glaze, a guy who's going to be a development guy. If Mumford wins the job out there, then again, that's great to have that depth there, especially some young guys that you can continue to work on and develop.
I know a lot of fans in the chat are yelling Dalton Wagner, because Dalton Wagner is probably the most popular Raiders offensive lineman who's not starting. Every
never played in the game except for preseason.
Right. Every BR live that I do, when I'm on Twitter, everyone's like, "What about Dalton Wagner? What about Dalton Wagner?" It's like we haven't seen anything from him, so there's not much you could say other
Right.
than we'll see.
Even when the Raiders had injuries, he was not on the active roster. So now, again, that was earlier in the year. Of course, that was Josh McDaniels, and when Antonio Pierce took over, he didn't elevate him either. So we'll see though. Now Luke Getsy's in charge, but I love it. I think one of the most fascinating things, Mo, is going to be how that offensive line shakes out in camp. I mean, it's going to be knockdown drag because you have guys there. You have some young talent. And the opportunity for them is there, so it's going to be fun. Now we talk about Jalen Guyton, whose name I spelled wrong. I left a T on the graphic you're seeing on your screen if you're watching us on YouTube. Sorry about that. But Jalen Guyton, not a surprise. You see GMs sign players they're familiar with. He's a guy that can come in. He's got the vertical speed pre-injury. So you look back at 2021, 31 passes, 448 yards, 3 touchdowns. 2022 is when he had his ACL injury. So for his career, 59 catches, 1,000 yards, 6 touchdowns. So he's not a guy, he's not like a bona fide starter. He's a guy who's going to compete for the number 3 spot with, I think, Michael Gallup and Trey Tucker, although Trey Tucker's a slot guy. But I do think having that third receiver who can go vertical, especially with Luke Getsy's offense, when you set up sometimes when you have 4 wideouts and you're really doing something different there. To me, it's a great guy to bring into camp. It gives him an opportunity to also have that wide receiver room competitive. And Mo, we talked about the lack of speed on this team. So now you have Michael Gallup, you have Guyton. You can think, oh, well, those are throwaway guys from other teams. Guyton was a free agent, but I like what he's doing in that room too. The guys he signed are all guys who can catch the ball well, but they have that vertical speed.
Yeah, Guyton ran a 4.39, I believe, at his combine or pro day. So he, as you said, has the vertical speed, can have the big plays over the top. He had some splash plays with the Chargers, but as you said, injury, couldn't catch on after a while, kind of fell out of favor, kind of fell out of the rotation. I would say if he makes the roster, it's going to be tough. He would have to make the roster, in my opinion, as an outside playmaker because he doesn't have much special teams experience as a returner. So correct. I believe he has like 2 kick returns in his whole career. Despite all that speed, not much in the return game. So he's going to have to get acquainted with the special teams unit. He's going to have to make way there if he's going to make the roster. Because usually, if you're not one of the top 3 receivers on the depth chart, you have to play special teams. As we know, the Raiders had Devontae Adams, Jacoby Myers. You assume Trey Tucker is going to still be in the plans. Maybe Michael Gallup has a role. I would put Michael Gallup ahead of Jalen Guyton today. Now we'll see what happens at camp, but today too. because of what Michael Gallup has done with the Cowboys, again over 1,100 receiving yards in the season. He was the number 2 wide receiver there before CeeDee Lamb got drafted. To me, he has the edge over Guyton, but we'll see what happens during camp.
Yeah, and I think you have Guyton too as again another depth piece because if he doesn't. And I forgot the rules with free agent. I think he can be put on the practice squad as inactive. So here's a guy that you can bring in, practice with the team, gives you an extra speed guy to work with your offense, everything. And then somebody goes down with an injury or whatever, you have a guy there. Tom Telesco's familiar with him. Clearly, Tom Telesco probably felt that the coaching staff before, even after Guyton came back from his injury in 2022, didn't feel maybe they used him correctly. That's what I always look at when I see guys like this come from another team where they follow the GM. And certainly he has a high amount of respect for him or he wouldn't have signed him to one of these free agent deals. So it's good though. Again, I love the depth. I love the opportunity for this team to compete. Now the question is, Mo, and there's a lot of stories going around from other outlets. And I think even up on Sportsnaut, we had a piece about this, about the Raiders and the free agents left to sign. Now, they signed Peat yesterday. And then there's still, to me, the one thing they haven't moved on has been a cornerback. And so I would imagine in the next few weeks, we see them sign some veteran cornerback, maybe 2, because I just think that they need that competition in that room. And they need, I think, a veteran to come in who might be a depth piece or might even compete for that outside spot.
I think they need a Casey Hayward type. You remember Casey Hayward coming to the Raiders, that veteran that solidifies the boundary. That's what the Raiders need right now because as I've said, and I think you agree with me on this, the Cameron Richardson more of a project, has the physical tools, but can he play right away? We'll see. Jacorian Bennett had a rough rookie year. Brendan Faison basically hasn't played in 2 years because he was hurt last year.
Right.
And then you got the guy that I like, MJ Devonshire, who I think is going to make the roster, but he is a 7th-round pick, and those guys aren't locks to make the roster, right? So I think they eventually sign a cornerback. I've been advocating for Steven Nelson. I know a lot of Raider fans say Xavier Howard, Stephon Gilmore, they're going to have a lot of suitors. There are going to be several teams interested in that. The Raiders get one of those guys, fine. But I would start getting acquainted with some other names like Steven Nelson, who I think reminds me a bit of Casey Hayward playing in that cover 3. And then you have also Dory Jackson, who played under Patrick Graham with the Giants. So there are a handful of options on the cornerback market. I would advocate for Steven Nelson. I think he would be a great fit and could be a starter right away, day one.
Yeah, to me, that's I look at, and of course, injuries happen, God forbid, but they happen. So, but I look at the Raiders' defense. Now, look at the offense. They're good. I still expect maybe a running back, maybe. Not somebody I think is going to necessarily have a major impact, but just somebody to come in camp. I also think outside of cornerback, even though they drafted for it, I wouldn't be surprised to see some sort of linebacker as well. But I think they're getting to the point, Mo, unless something pops up and something different happens, where they're starting to be like, okay, where are some spots we need to plug in? Weren't able to address the first round of free agency, weren't able to address in the draft. And we're going to bring in some guys where we feel we need to have competition or we need some depth. Now, they're doing that on the offensive line. It was a great sign that they're putting so much effort into the offensive line, and I think they're in a good spot there for some competition. Are they perfect? No. Could they use more talent? Yes. But you are where you are, and you can't do it overnight at every position. So it'll be interesting. Go ahead, Mo.
Let's also remember that not every signing that the Raiders make is going to make the roster. So I think we get into the habit, not we, but some people get into the habit.
Collective we.
Yes. They sign a guy as like, oh, this guy's going to be good. This guy's going to make the roster. He's going to do this. He's going to do that. And then he gets cut after the first week of camp. Like, remember, we go through this process every year. Teams are accumulating talent. You can have 90 guys going to training camp, but obviously it gets cut down to 53 once the season starts. So half of it, literally about almost, I would not half, but 30 something of these guys aren't going to make the roster.
Correct.
It's just not going to happen. Now you have high hopes. And maybe this guy could be a depth piece. This guy could be a starter. This guy could contribute. This guy could make the practice squad. But 37 guys, assuming you fill up the roster to 90, 37 guys are going to be cut.
Yep.
Just remember that.
Absolutely.
Or traded.
Don't fall in love with too many people yet. All right. We are going to step aside for our first break here on the Tuesday edition. Yes, I know we put the episode out a little bit late, but we wanted to be as fresh as possible with the signings yesterday. So we're doing this on Tuesday morning. So hang with us. After the break, we're going to get into some more discussion around the Raiders and some other interesting things happening off the field in just a second here on Silver and Black Today, an Odyssey Sports Original Podcast. You're with Mo. You're with Scott. We're coming back. Don't go anywhere. All right, welcome back. It is time for our second segment here on the Tuesday edition of Silver and Black Today in the off season. I know. Listen, and it's funny because I'm gonna for you folks on YouTube, I'm gonna zoom out a little bit. But I have this little thing. If you see this little sign behind me, and it scrolls, and it's got Mo's logo, my logo, and the show logo. But if you look at it, and I think it comes up right after this one. But anyway, when it comes up, you see, what is that bubble? Oh, I don't know what that was. That was weird. You see how many days until kickoff. There it is. 4 months and 1 day until the Raiders kick off the 2024 season. So we got 4 months. Mo and I are here for you. We're your emotional support buddies. Right, Mo? We're here for
your off-season guidance counselors.
That's right. We want to help you keep your sanity without the use of pharmaceuticals. So we are here talking about Raiders football. And yes, there's things to talk about. It's so interesting because a lot of times I get notes from viewers or listeners, Mo, and they're like, man, how do you guys do these shows in like July? And he said, his name was John. John's like, you guys always do a good job of like finding something to talk about. And John, to be clear, We do, and thank you very, very much. We appreciate it. We get lots of criticism, lots of support, and both are good. We learn from both of them, but it's hard. When we get into July, man, we're searching for stuff. That's why we'll have guests on. But you know what? The way the NFL season has gone, Mo, and you know this, being the senior NFL writer over Bleacher Report, the NFL never stops. There's always something. Yes, the volume goes down considerably, especially once we get past these mini camps coming up here in May, and then it kind of tails off until we get to camp. But there's always something going on.
Right. So like we're going to talk about it today, the schedule release, right? So the NFL makes an announcement for the announcement of the schedule release. The NFL does a good job of marketing their product, no matter how insignificant it may sound. To the outside person, they're like, why do you care so much about a schedule release when you know who the teams are going to play already? I'm like, well, for the fans, it's about planning their trips and what games they're going to go to. But also you get an idea of how things are going to pan out. Who do they play off of a bye? Do they have 3 straight home games? Do they have 3 straight away games?
Right.
Do they play a cold weather team where they have to travel to the East Coast time zone? That stuff matters. That stuff factors into the result of the game. So back to my point about the NFL, they do a good job of marketing their product, which gives us a chance to take those morsels and turn it into 2 or 3 segments of a show once or twice a week.
Yes, and if only Major League Baseball just camped in the NFL office and learned from them. And actually, I would say the NBA too, because while the NBA does a good job with marketing, so obviously it's got its television and its huge imprint. And congratulations so far on your Knicks, by the way. I know you're very, very happy.
Yes.
My Golden Knights got bounced from the Stanley Cup playoffs, so we don't get to repeat as champions. That sucks. But nonetheless, your point about the schedule, if you look too, and we're going to get into this. Well, first, let's talk first real quickly about the Raiders are in negotiations. Looks like it's going to happen. The Raiders are going to move their training camp out of Las Vegas. Remember, I think they originally did that because of COVID, and they have that beautiful practice facility in Henderson, Nevada, right next to Las Vegas, where I used to live. And they're going to move to Costa Mesa, take over the old facility the Chargers used to practice in when the Chargers moved to Los Angeles, and invest some money in it, give some money to the local community. It's really interesting. Some people I know are disappointed because they love to go to Las Vegas. Some of our Bay Area listeners, some of our LA listeners even love to go to Las Vegas because you get to go to Las Vegas to see the Raiders in camp, and there's all the other stuff to do. But as we know, Mo, from the numbers on our show, the number of people from Los Angeles who listen to this show is massive. The Raiders are still the number 1 team in LA, I think, and maybe the Rams are close there now too because the Rams have had success. But nonetheless, they are going to go to Costa Mesa, and a lot of Raider Nation in Los Angeles is really excited about it. I think it's actually a very brilliant move for the Raiders to keep feeding that market. I'm surprised the NFL teams, the Rams and the Chargers, are okay with it. I know the Cowboys practiced in Oxnard and all that kind of stuff, and so did the Raiders. But I'm surprised that the NFL let that happen. But I think the NFL realizes, look, those are Raider fans in LA. They're never going to be Charger or Rams fans. So I like the move, and I think it's a good one.
Why not lean into it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, not to diss the Raider fans that love going to Vegas.
No, not at all.
Locals out there, but you know the genesis of the Raiders and their organization and where they come from. Exactly. So it makes sense to me. A lot of people want to know. Like I saw Vinny Bonsignor, our buddy over there at the Las Vegas Review Journal, post the article. A lot of people are just asking why. What's the point of doing it? And I think part of it is that you have to, again, lean into the fanfare.
Yeah. And remember, too, listen, I lived for a total of 16 years in Las Vegas. July sucks. August
I know where
sucks.
this is going. I knew this is going to weather.
It's hot. Now, they have the air-conditioned inside facility, and that's great. But I think, too, also you start to look at philosophies here, Mo, and that is there's some, I think, and listen, again, they were there, number 1, because of COVID. As soon as COVID was over, I thought they were going to go back to Napa, or I thought they were going to do something different, maybe Los Angeles. And so they didn't. But now you have you have a coaching staff. Of course, Antonio Pierce is from Los Angeles area in Compton. It makes a lot of sense. And also, I think teams and I think Pierce, he's an old school guy. Get the guys out of town, get them away from their regular everyday life. You put them in accommodations wherever they're going to stay. It's like a dormitory because they're all there together. And I like it. I think it's good. And I think you need to reward. Listen, when the Raiders go down to play the Chargers every year, we know how it goes. It's mostly Raider fans in the stadium. When they play the Rams on the occasions they do, you also see a massive contingent. So the Raiders are feeding the beast there. They want to make sure they're fans. And I think that the Southern California fans, they've been so loyal for so long. They've been gone since 1994, right? So when they went to Oakland. So to me, it's great. And so I applaud it. I think it's a good move for the Raiders, and we'll see how it all winds up. You talked about the schedule release and how that's all going to go down. And I want to just hit on a couple points here, because some people are like, oh, it's so ridiculous. And yes, I would like the NFL just to release it. But remember, too, the teams now are all in on this, and it's a great opportunity for the market. The videos that these teams are putting out, not all teams, some teams really suck at it, but the videos the teams put out, the unveiling, they put out these amazing videos, because every NFL staff now has a social media staff and a digital media staff. They have people on staff. That's all they do is shoot video. You see the Raiders, they do great stuff. So you see this. So that also allows the team to engage with their fans in a very creative way. And so I'll review some of those. When we get those videos, we're going to play some of them on here, the good and the bad and the ugly. And hopefully the Raiders are in the good. But the away opponents, if you look at this, to your point about late in the season, Mo, okay, so you have Los Angeles, you have Miami, you have New Orleans, no worries there. Baltimore. Now, if you got to go to Baltimore in December, late December, not fun. Then you have Cincinnati, where I'm at. Cincinnati, late December, not fun. Kansas City, Denver, not fun. You know, one of those Kansas City or Denver games will be late in the season. It just always seems to. They kind of escaped it last year, but I think that this year you'll see. Look, the Raiders are going to play in cold weather games. It's just not a problem. But if you see a stretch where their schedule is, they got to play Kansas City, then they got to play Miami, then they got to play Baltimore. And if that's late in the season, that has a huge impact on how you look at a team, because that's a tough 3-game stretch. And if 2 of those games are on the road in the wintertime in the Eastern time zone, it sort of, I think it plays into what's going on. And you did a story up on Sportsnaut today. It's linked in the description below. By the way, on each show, Mo and I will list out the recent stories we have about the Raiders. So you can always click there if you can't find them. But you did a story on the schedule and sort of what you looked at as what could happen with the Raiders and this schedule. And I want you to hit on a couple of these items because you kind of teased it. I'm going to bring it up on the screen here. You kind of teased it when we were talking about it originally. But talk about this story you got up today on Sportsnaut with the 3 projections. We don't want to give away the story because we want people to go read it. But just give us some highlights, Mo, on this stuff and what you're thinking. Maybe we focus on the primetime games. What do you think you think the Raiders are going to have another slew of primetime games like they've had before?
I don't think so, and fans aren't going to want to hear that. But if you look at what the NFL does with its schedule, the NFL usually likes to showcase star quarterbacks or quarterbacks who have a storyline with another team. So the Raiders are going to play the Saints, right? So the focus is going to be on Derek Carr. Derek Carr spent all of these years with the Raiders. Now they're hosting the Raiders in New Orleans. That's going to be a big focal point when they play each other. I assume that's going to be a primetime game, Sunday Night Football, Monday Night Football, one of the two, right? But the Raiders don't have a star quarterback right now on their roster. I know a lot of people love Aiden O'Connell. I know a lot of people like Gardner Minshew, right? But the NFL, the casual fan, doesn't know who they are. If you're outside the Raider fan base or the Jaguars fan base who Gardner Minshew played for, or the Colts fan base who Gardner Minshew played for, you're not familiar with Gardner Minshew. And the NFL is not going to showcase Gardner Minshew or Aiden O'Connell. Sorry, Raider fans, but that's just how business works. They love stars. And the Raiders had 6 primetime games if you include Thursday Night Football last year. I think they're going to have fewer than 5 this year. I think the Raiders are going to have 4 primetime games. One of them, as I said, being the Saints. I also think they're going to get a primetime game against the Chiefs because they beat the Chiefs last year in Kansas City on Christmas. I think the NFL love to see that. Love to see the renewed rivalry where the team that's been getting beaten actually wins a game against the reigning champion. So I think the Chiefs Raiders will have another primetime game. I think the Jim Harbaugh thing is very interesting in Los Angeles with the Chargers. I think the Raiders and the Chargers, especially with Tom Telesco being the GM of the Raiders now, some crossover there. That will be a primetime game. I also think the Raiders are going to have a primetime game against either Baltimore, Cincinnati, or Miami because those are teams that are playoff caliber squads that the NFL is going to want to showcase.
Yes.
And I think the Raiders are going to benefit from that.
Yes, star quarterbacks too, right? Because that's what drives the league. And so I was going to mention Baltimore and Cincinnati, especially if it's later in the season, because you figure Baltimore and Cincinnati should be in a playoff hunt, and the Raiders could very well be too. The Raiders lack, and look, this is nothing against the guys, but they lack that star power at quarterback, which is a big deal. Because if it's Mahomes versus Lamar Jackson, Mahomes versus Burrow, that's going to be on national TV. It's so understand that. Now it doesn't matter. The Raiders win, they win. Who cares if they win with Joe Schmo at quarterback as long as they win? But I think when you're talking about the schedule and you're talking about those primetime games, also remember last year, not that the Raiders were coming in as some juggernaut team people thought were going to be great, but the Super Bowl was in Las Vegas. So anytime they could highlight Las Vegas, they were going to do it, especially Allegiant Stadium and all that, which is what they did. So I think you're right about your pick there too. But it'll be interesting. We'll go over, if we have it by the time we go on Thursday, we'll go through it. If not, we'll either delay the show a little bit or we'll figure it out because I want to get through that schedule and talk about it. But, it's not an easy schedule with what you have on the docket right now, the teams, and you mentioned a bunch of those. And I look at them, some of those teams are much better. The Falcons, I think, are going to be much better with Kirk Cousins. I think the Panthers will be better, but whatever. But the Browns, the Chargers, I think the Chargers again are getting so much love. And I'm not just saying this to pander to the crowd, Mo, but the Chargers schedule is not easy. And I think that they kind of took a step back, losing all those veterans. Yes, they're going to be better on the offensive line. Yes, Jim Harbaugh is a better coach. But, man, they're getting all this love. And I'm thinking to myself, I just don't see it.
I see why they're getting all this love. One, they have the quarterback, Justin Herbert. Now, you mentioned he doesn't have the playmakers on the perimeter. But if you look at Greg Roman and Jim Harbaugh, what do they do when they put their teams together? Those are physical football teams who are going to run the football. What did the Chargers do? They brought in Greg Roman's running backs from the Baltimore Ravens. They signed J.K. Dobbins. They signed Gus Edwards. Now, those two guys are going to be the focal point of the offense. Everyone's paying attention to the wide receivers, but the focal point is going to be the run game. My problem with the Chargers is that J.K. Dobbins hasn't been healthy for 2 seasons now. He only played 1 game last year, and he missed half the season recovering from, I believe, an ACL or an Achilles the year before. So he hasn't been healthy. Now, he says the Chargers are going to get a healthy running back. We'll see. But if he gets hurt, I could see the Chargers having to trade for a running back before the deadline.
Agree.
Because, again, that's going to be the bread and butter of their offense. A lot of people are paying attention. What about their wide receivers? They got rid of Keenan Allen. They got rid of Mike Williams. That's fine for a Greg Roman offense because they're not going to throw the ball the whole lot. No. They're going to lead the league in rushing attempts. That's what he did in Baltimore. That's what he's going to do in Los Angeles. They're going to try to play tough defense, and they're going to run the football. Now, again, my questions are health. J.K. Dobbins getting hurt last 2 years. On the defensive side, Joey Bosa seems like he's hurt every other year. So same thing with Derwin James. So yes. I think the Chargers is going to be the question with them is attrition. I look at their schedule and I think they can win 9 or 10 games. The problem is, can their star players, can their key players stay healthy for the duration of the year?
Yeah, and I think the Lad McConkey pick from Georgia, the wide receiver, was a great pick for them. Obviously, Joe Alt is a great pick, and then Junior Colson. So like I like some of the things they did, but I think every year for whatever reason, maybe it's because they're in LA now, but and obviously, like you said, the quarterback, they're always, I think, overrated. And you're looking at it from a very objective point of view, which is, hey, yeah, I think they'll be better in certain areas. And obviously with Greg Roman, you talked about it, proven guy. I think he will turn things around there. But I don't think it's going to be as fast as people suspect. But I do think they'll be scrappy and they will win games because of the difference in style and because of what Jim Harbaugh does.
Now, someone asked me this on Twitter and asked me, what do I think of the Chargers in their matchup with the Raiders? I think the Raiders and the Chargers are going to play a very similar style of football.
Yes.
I think the Raiders-Chargers games are going to be very interesting because I think they're going to play, again, physical football against each other. Those games are going to be knockdown dragouts. They're going to remind you of those AFC North games with the Steelers and the Ravens, in my opinion. The difference, I think, though, is the Raiders can do a lot more with their offense. If Luke Getsy's creative enough, he has way more playmakers. Brock Bowers, Devontae Adams, Jacoby Myers by a mile. The Raiders have
Yes.
better playmakers, so they can do more with their offense again. But it boils down, can Luke get to use those guys optimally? Because if he can, the Raiders should have the advantage over the Chargers because of those playmakers on the perimeter.
You're absolutely right. And I know, obviously, the connection, Tom Telesco being the former Charger GM, but going by the coach's style of play, we saw what the Raiders have done. We talked about it in the first segment about signings on the offensive line. You look at what the Chargers did. Now, Charger fans were disappointed idiotically because they got Joe Alt in the first round. It's like, no, you got to build the trenches. You have your franchise quarterback. You want him to get killed and get injured again? No. So they get Joe Alt, and then they get Junior Colson, a guy obviously Jim Harbaugh knows. So I think you're right, though. I think the games between the Raiders and Chargers, they're always fun. And yes, the Chargers were just freaking mollywopped by the Raiders in that 63-point game. But I think you're right. I think you're going to see the Raiders will have the offensive edge. But I'd still think those games, and I'm looking way ahead here, I think those games will actually be lower scoring than we're used to your point about the NFC North. So it's going to be fun to watch that, and I like the Raiders' edge on the offense. Go ahead.
Really quick, the other thing, too, I want to note is I was on Bleacher Report Live with a Chiefs reporter-writer.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
She said the one thing that the Chiefs don't like is to play physical football, and it's going to be interesting to see how the Chargers, the Raiders, and even the Broncos play the Chiefs. I think all three teams are going to try to run the football on the Chiefs. If you look at the way these teams are built, again, I know the Raiders have those perimeter playmakers, but you look at Luke Getsy, even without Justin Fields, he's usually had pretty good rushing offenses. The Chargers, as I explained, with Greg Roman and Jim Harbaugh, physical football, run the football. The Denver Broncos even, who did they draft? Your guy, Audric Estime, sorry. But they're going to use 3 running backs. They have Javonte Williams. They have Estime now. They have, I believe, Samaje Perine. So they can run 3-4 running backs. They have Jaleel McLaughlin. Yeah. Also, as a 4th running back, give them some speed out of the backfield because they're going to be limited in the passing game with Bo Nix or Jarrett Stidham. Who knows if Cortland Sutton's going to be back. They're going to run the football. So it'll be interesting to see all 3 teams and how they play the Chiefs. I think the Chiefs are vulnerable against the run game.
And you're right. And I think you're going to see the AFC West really competitive as it usually should be this year, because I think the Broncos are the worst team in the division still, but nonetheless, if you look at that, I think it's going to be the top 3 teams. And then the Broncos, I think, will have the ability to beat people if things work out for them and the quarterbacks can play well enough, at least in their first year, or in Bo Nix's first year, if he wins out as starter. So you look at that and you just think, man, this is going to be, like you said, the NFC North black and blue division. I think it's the Raiders and the Chiefs. And I think Antonio Pierce, by the way, I know some people have criticized him for the kind of boastfulness and the smack talk. Sometimes I think it's a little too much, but I like it. It's set the tone. And I think the Chiefs rivalry, I think Antonio Pierce, he's not going to let his players do it. I think he's going to do it, which is dangerous. I know the Chiefs back-to-back Super Bowl winners, and Mahomes says he's promising they're going back again this year. But I think you're going to get really physical with them, even penalties, man. If you get a penalty early to set a tone, and it's not going to impact the game too greatly, I think that's the kind of stuff they're going to do, and I'm all here for it. So it'll be fun. Last thing before we get to a break, number changes, Mo. Jalen Guyton comes in. He takes number 4 because Aiden O'Connell gave up number 4. He's going to wear number 12. Of course, Rich Gannon and of course, Snake, Ken Stabler's number. Great history with that number in Raiders fandom. And so I love it. I like the fact that O'Connell embraces a number that has so much history with the Raiders. Now he's got a lot more to live up to just wearing the number. But I'm always curious because I was a uniform guy when I was younger growing up. So I had jerseys. I had all this stuff. I think we've talked about this before. And so when guys got numbers or whatever, it was okay. But it's really interesting in Raider Nation, people are really focused on the numbers and what a big deal it is. And to me, it's just interesting because I don't know. I think it's because they look at it, and if it's a number they like, then they'll buy the jersey. But it's a new thing for me. I feel like it's a bigger deal now.
I don't know. Maybe you're just seeing it now because of social media. You're seeing how much people care about it now. But numbers mean a lot. and I'm just people are gonna accuse me of being a Jets fan here, but it's not just Raider fans. Olafashanu took Nick Mangold's old number, and Jets fans were upset about that. And so you're seeing it across, not just Raider fans, you're seeing it across the board, where if a player takes a certain number and that number has a certain significance to a fan base, especially if it's a Hall of Fame player or a favorable player, fans don't really like that. So I made the joke that Aiden O'Connell's going to tap into his inner Tom Brady. People are like, hey, it's Kenny Stabler, it's Rich Gannon. I get it. But the joke was, being that Tom Brady was an immobile quarterback, and Aiden O'Connell's knocked for his mobility. Yeah. He's going to tap into his Tom Brady mode, because he's going to have to move a little bit more and be a little bit more savvy in the pocket. Now, people didn't catch that joke, unfortunately, but it goes to show you how, people are passionate about jersey numbers and what number players pick.
They are. Yeah. And remember, last year, Aiden O'Connell comes in as a 4th-round draft pick, uphill battle to make the team. So he does amazing and obviously becomes a starting quarterback. They gave him number 4 last year, and people were critical because, Derek Carr just left. It's a slap in the face, blah, blah, which I never understood. It's like, when you're gone, man. When the Yankees lose a player and now they don't retire jerseys anymore because they retired so many of them. But if somebody comes in and gets number 2 or number 4, I think 4 is retired. But, the same with the Raiders don't retire jersey numbers. So if the Raiders don't retire jersey numbers and the kid comes in and takes a number of a Raider great, shouldn't be mad at that. And in O'Connell's case, it was assigned to him. He didn't even pick it, and he didn't really care what was going on. He's just trying to make the team. And people got angry about it. Now, was that a shot from Josh McDaniels at him? Maybe Josh McDaniels told him to do it. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe. Knowing that he was a POS, maybe he did, because he was such a jerk. But now Guyton's going to wear number 4, which you said, you put a post up on x.com talking about number 4 at wide receiver. It's going to be strange to see number 4 running down the field after 10 years of Derek Carr unable to run. But you'll have that. And then the other jersey numbers, we see some people taking Lester Hayes's number. We see other folks take number 8, which was Josh Jacobs, 24, of course, which has a great history with the Raiders. And so you look at that and you're like, yeah, but that to me, and this is where I'm not like criticizing people who get upset about it or whatever, but it's just really interesting, because I think any fan base that wouldn't get mad about numbers, now you like certain numbers and you want players to, but would be Raider Nation, because they don't retire any of them. So if somebody comes in and grabs a great number, if they grab, number 46, okay, great Raider, right? Or if they grab number 87, like Michael Mayer did last year, good. You want to see maybe he's the next guy. So, but interesting discussion, as I see with not a lot of football to talk about. People are talking about jersey numbers.
I want off comment. I like the 12 on Aiden O'Connell. I think it suits him, because he had a double-digit number in college. Of course, that number wasn't available when he got to the Raiders, but I like 12 on Aiden O'Connell. Not to say it has any bearing on how he performs on the football field, but looks good.
Yes, and it's refreshing too that you see quarterbacks going back to regular, I call them regular double-digit numbers, or single digits are fine too. Great single-digit numbers. But 1 through 19, like, to me, that's quarterback numbers. Now, the way the NFL got rid of those rules, you had all these jamokes last year wearing number 0, right? You had freaking quarterbacks wearing 0. You had offensive line. I mean, it was crazy. So it's good to see some of these guys kind of starting to come back to legacy numbers, which is cool. All right, enough number stuff. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we'll talk about Josh Jacobs. Josh Jacobs and his Irish goodbye to Raider Nation has not made people very, very happy. So we're going to talk a little bit about that when we come back here on Silver and Black today, the Tuesday edition. You're with Scott and Mo. We're coming back. Please stay where you are. Welcome back. It's time for the home stretch here on Silver and Black today, the only podcast. Well, there's a few others I like and listen to too, especially my buddy Q with his daily Raiders podcast. Make sure you check him out. But anyway, we're here. We're your premier podcast talking about Las Vegas Raiders football, an Odyssey Sports original podcast. You're with Scott Branson. You're with Mo Moten. We're talking Raiders football. Do us a favor. Make sure you subscribe wherever you get your audio. and on YouTube. Make sure you hit the YouTube channel, hit subscription and the notifications bell so you can watch us as well. All right. Okay, so it's interesting. Again, not a lot of football to talk about. Draft is over. Yes, the Raiders have made some roster moves that made them stronger. We've talked about that. But this is one thing I want to, because it opens up a larger discussion. And we've actually had this discussion on our show before. We've had this discussion when I was back on Raider Nation Radio on a daily show. I had this discussion one time with a couple people as well, including Q. And we're going to have it again because Josh Jacobs, who left the Raiders, free agency, right? He had every right to do that. He goes signs with the Green Bay Packers. And he doesn't say goodbye, apparently, for some people. And this isn't me. I don't expect anything out of anybody anymore in society, just because, people have different ways of doing things. And I don't feel like anybody owes me anything. In fact, I think in the world, I got to do my own thing and I got to work hard and earn everything I get. So Josh Jacobs leaves. He doesn't do what a lot of athletes do now. They take out a full page ad in the local newspaper. Well, not anymore so much because you can reach more people with your Twitter account, but they put up say, hey, thank you this, thank you for fans. I love playing for you, blah, 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 and I'm out. Josh Jacobs didn't do that. And a lot of Raider fans, and I'm not going to say all, I'm saying a lot based on what I've seen online. A lot of Raider fans took umbrage with that and they're mad and they were attacking him on social media. And without getting too deeply into the whole social media malaise, because you and I have talked about that too, I'm wondering, like, it's not like he's your brother or your father, your uncle, and your uncle moved out of town and didn't say goodbye. This is a player that most of you have never met. If you may have met him once or twice at some signing or whatever, great, awesome. Maybe he was really nice to you and you appreciated it. But Josh Jacobs doesn't owe a formal goodbye to anybody, is my position, Mo. And I, as a fan, again, if I'm a fan, I could give two craps. If he says something nice, great, that's awesome, that's classy. If he doesn't, see you later. You're on the Packers. I hope he beats your ass if we ever play you. I mean,
I agree with you there. There are two things here. I'm going to say two things here, and I'll try to be as clear as possible because people are going to jump on the first thing I say here. You're right. He doesn't owe anyone a goodbye. Doesn't have to say goodbye. Doesn't have to. He's not obligated to do so. But what I will say, though, whether you like it or not, NFL players, athletes have fans that look up to them.
They do.
And they got fans who are very passionate about them. You got to understand, fans support you. They go to your games. They cheer for you. They buy your jerseys. All of that stuff goes into it. So there's an emotional component to this. So while the player doesn't owe fans an apology or a tweet or whatever you want to call it, a message, a goodbye, whatever, just understand that as an athlete, while you don't ask for this, you are looked up to as a role model by a lot of people. And when you don't give that goodbye, the people who the younger, especially the younger fans, if you're older, if you're 60 years old crying about a goodbye, then you're lost cause. But for the younger fans, like 13, 14 years old, saying, hey, Josh Jacobs, if you're a teenager out there saying, hey, I wish Josh Jacobs would have said goodbye because he was my favorite player. I bought his jersey, watched him. I met him. I understand that sentiment from a younger fan. But again, if you're 50 years old crying about a goodbye from a football player, you need to get your priorities straight.
But
for the younger fan, but for the younger fans, if you're a teenager, young 20s, I kind of understand it because there's an emotional component to it.
Yeah, and I understand it being disappointed. That's the word I would use. Like if it happened that way and it's one of my favorite guys, and look, I grew up respecting certain athletes and some of them crushed that when I met them or they did something stupid. And so I was like, oh, it's disappointing. But to get mad and attack people in social media. Now, the other thing I want to go back to here, and now maybe some people will get mad at me, but if you can find it, show it to me. And that is, if you look at the totality of Josh Jacobs' time with the Raiders, how well he did on the field at times, no question, right? I mean, the numbers speak for themselves. But he was always very cryptic in social media. He put a lot of negative things out there when he was going through stuff. So it didn't surprise me because I didn't see a lot of gratitude towards the fans. Not that he didn't do it a couple times, but I didn't see a lot of gratitude to begin with. I'm not saying he's not thankful for where he is, because I don't know that. So I'm not going to pass judgment on him. But going by social media, I didn't see a lot of like what I see from Max Crosby, right? Max Crosby, very interactive with fans. Fans will send him pictures of their kids wearing the jersey on Christmas. He reposts it and says, thank you. That's his style. That's what he does. I never saw Josh Jacobs do that anyway. So I don't think it's out of character for him not to post something as a goodbye.
Right. There was an incident where I think Josh Jacobs asked to get in contact with someone. There was an unfortunate situation.
Yes.
And someone tried to say, hey, someone passed away, and he was like, get me in contact with them. And he never did.
Yeah.
So he's been under fire for that too. So to your point, there's been a pattern of, I don't want to say a disconnect with the fan base, but he's not necessarily someone I would expect to write a long message on Twitter saying, thank you all. Now, he may eventually still do it.
Sure.
I'm not saying he won't, because, it's May. He hasn't even played a game with the Packers yet. He may do it in June. He may do it on his own time, whatever. And you know how human nature works. When someone tells you to do something or pushing you to do something, it makes you not want to do it, right? And people are coming out attacking you. Why didn't you say goodbye? It makes that person more resistant. Like, all these people coming at me. Now I'm not going to do it.
Right.
I was going to do it in June. Now I'm not going to do it. These people are attacking me.
Yes.
But to my point, like he didn't strike me as a type that would write a long Twitter message anyway. It would be great if he does do it, but if he doesn't, to me, as a 30-year-old man who's more of a sports right now than a fan than anything, that's my perspective. But again, I'll go back to my point about younger fans, I think, who look up to him. I could see it impacting them a lot more than me or someone your age.
Correct. And I think that the unfortunate thing here too, and again, I'm not saying that fans can't be upset when players they like leave and all that, because that's part of sports fandom, right? That's what it is. When your guy, you love a guy. And the Raiders had plenty of them, Khalil Mack, all these different players. So I get that. I think the expectations we have, and I say collective we, the expectations we now have of athletes, because we have more access to information, because they're involved in social media, sets an unrealistic expectation. I think you're right. I think giving Josh Jacobs the benefit of the doubt, which I will do, to your point, he may come out sometime. He may do an interview with a guy in Green Bay for the newspaper where he says, hey, you know what? I loved my time in Raider Nation. The fans were awesome. Thanks to those fans. But now, now I'm a cheesehead or whatever. Okay, cool. So he gives you, hey, the nod. He says, thank you in his way. Remember, everybody's different too. You see high school kids writing these big, long freaking thesis about where they're selecting going to college. It's like, do we really need that? Just where are you going to college, kid? Go have fun, do really well, get an education, and God bless you. But you don't need to send a big long note on Twitter. So I think our expectations get a little high and get a little different. And that also feeds into this, because now people expect it. They're spoiled because of people like Max Crosby, right? And Derek Carr, who used to talk to people and all that kind of stuff before he was blocking everybody. And so you get accustomed to that and you expect it. And guess what? We all are individuals. We all have different ways of doing things. And so you can't expect it out of one player what you see from another, because that's expecting them to dress the same way, to talk the same way. It just doesn't work that way.
Yeah, I just the other thing too is, and I found this funny, is that it shows that he mattered. No matter what people say about him now, about not saying goodbye, it shows that people, for the fact that people care that he didn't say goodbye, shows how much he meant to the fan base, right?
Absolutely.
So Raider fans aren't saying, hey, Alex Leatherwood didn't say goodbye to us, right? They're not mad about Alex Leatherwood. They're not saying, hey, Damon Arnett didn't write a goodbye note.
We're still waiting for the Tanner Muse note.
Right. So it shows that if the fan base cares about you saying goodbye, it shows that how much you meant to the team and to them, because they're like, well, we, not that we looked up to you, but we held you to this esteem. We put you on this level of Raider players. We gave you this respect. At least give us the respect back in return of just saying goodbye and thank you.
No, I agree with that. And I will point out, though, that Phil Jones, of course, of the Unfiltered Truth, and I made a bet for a steak dinner. I bet that Josh Jacobs would not be back. He bet that he would be. So Phil owes me a steak, which is great. But yeah, and I think when I look at Raider fans too, and I don't just say this because I do a Raider show. Some people won't believe me, but it's true. I've never seen a fan base. Now, every team has players that are beloved. It doesn't matter what team it is. Okay, I get that, but I've never seen a fan base that is more loyal to and appreciates the guys. And I'm talking even special teams guys that aren't stars. They treat them like family, just like fans treat each other in Raider Nation. So I to your point that you made earlier in this discussion, which is the emotional bond, and so you get it. But I just think, we live in a different world today, and you can't. The expectations sometimes will surpass what the reality is. So just be careful out there with that stuff. But we'll see. Now it's time for Zeus to step up.
Zeus start signing some autographs and kissing babies and shaking hands.
Oh my goodness! Yes, we're in election year, of course, so that's a good analogy. But yeah, so we'll see what happens there, and if he ever says anything about Raider Nation, great. I'm sure he wouldn't have anything. But the thing is, you don't beat something out of anybody. To your point,
right?
If you're going to berate somebody, that's where we get a little too comfortable. When you start attacking athletes, I've never done it. And never will do it, especially around performance. Now, if somebody goes out and does something stupid, by the way, did you watch, Mo, any of all? And I know people will say I wouldn't watch that because it's Tom Brady, but the Tom Brady roast, holy moly, is it hysterical? So, and if you like people to really make fun of Tom Brady, watch it because you'll get a lot of pleasure. A couple of Raiders mentions in there, which I'll talk about in a second. But funny stuff. If you haven't watched it on Netflix, I recommend it highly.
I've seen bits and pieces. I haven't watched it in total, but I've seen bits and pieces, and I've also seen the other side of it, that there are some people who weren't too happy about things that were mentioned. So there were other families. I'll say that I don't want to spoil it.
Aaron Hernandez.
But there were other families who were involved with these jokes that didn't take too kindly to it. And I will say that it's a roast. It's it's not going to be politically correct. It's not going to be sensitive to your feelings. That's what a roast is, people.
Yes. and the Raiders played in it. And I'll tell you why. One will make you very angry, and the other one will make you somewhat happy and say, oh, cool. But Bill Belichick, who went on a little too long, but he had a couple of funny quips. And because Randy Moss was there sitting with Tom Brady and former Patriot teammates. And he looks over at Randy Moss. He says, Randy Moss, he's like, remember when I rescued you from the Raiders? And Randy Moss, who you guys all disagree or disown anyway, says, you're right, you did. So there you go. That's that one. On the positive side, you had Will Ferrell come out as Ron Burgundy, another bit that went on too long but had some funny pieces. But he said, oh, Tom Brady, at one point he said, oh, you're retired until you quarterback the Raiders in the playoffs. So that was the other one, which will either make you happy or not make you happy. But funny stuff. But it was, to your point, some of the families, Aaron Hernandez was mentioned a lot in very, very, and I can't mention more than half, 90% of these jokes on the air here on our show. I could, but I'm not going to. But funny stuff, very crass stuff. But he was mentioned a lot around suicide, around killing people and that kind of stuff. And I know the mother of his children was not happy about it, which is one of the things you mentioned. But funny stuff. But I think, though, that watching the roast, I'm just reminded again how sensitive people are today to a lot of things, right? I'm not passing judgment saying it's right or wrong. It just is what it is. And so you're right with this stuff with players and interaction. And that's the thing, too. I learned this in college, Mo. And I'll let you comment on this, but I learned this in college. I was working big boxing matches when I was at UNLV, just rolling cable for TV, right? Just menial job. It was great, though. I got to see all the fights. And I met everybody. I met Bruce Willis. I met Farrakhan. I mean, you name the kind of person from walk of life celebrity. I met them. And some of them were really disappointing. And I never looked at them again that way as somebody I looked up to or whatever. So I think social media makes them more available to us. And we don't always like what we get.
What is that old saying? Don't meet your heroes, right? Because you may not meet up to your expectations of who they really are as a person. But about the roast and comedy in general, and I believe comedy is very hard nowadays because of the sensitivity that's out there. when you go to a roast, or if you're going to listen to a roast or watch a roast, or you're going to go to a comedy show, listen to a comedy show, you can't go in there and with your defense up.
Yeah.
Because you're going to be offended by something that's said, because I'm not saying that's what comedy is. Some people do different brands or styles of comedy. I get it. But when you're at a comedy show, especially you're a comedian, what type of content, type of things he or she may say, just know you're at a comedy show. The setting is not of a regular setting where you wouldn't say certain things in, two people on a regular day. It's a comedy show. There are going to be things, as you said, that are crass, that are not politically correct, that may cross the line a little bit. That's part of a lot of people's shtick. That's what it is. If that stuff offends you, don't watch it.
Yes.
Don't listen to it.
Yes. And you're right, because at the end of the day, look, we live in, I think, the greatest country. Is it flawed? Sure it is. But we live in the greatest country on earth. And nowhere in the Bill of Rights does it say you have the right to not be offended. So if you're offended, you just don't partake in it. You leave, you whatever. So you're right. So, but it was, man, there were so many jokes I wish I could tell about Kim Kardashian, because she was there. I mean, it's a 3-hour thing. It was too long, but man, there's some pieces that are so funny. And it just, the Belichick jokes were great too. Even Rob Gronkowski, who had one of the most crass ones of all, as you can imagine, getting up there and talking about stuff. So I recommend it, even though you guys hate Tom Brady, as most people do. So
wasn't it Robert Kraft who said that the Raiders already did your favorite thing and got rid of Jimmy Garoppolo so you can go play for him already?
Yeah. Too funny. Anyway, Mo, what else do you got going? You have any Bleacher Report lives coming up here? I know it's Tuesday. We'll have our show Thursday with our Raider Nation mailbag, but what else you got coming up?
So whenever the NFL decides to make their big, huge announcement with the schedule, I will go live immediately after or within 2 hours of the schedule release and just kind of break down what the schedule looks like for the Raiders and, the tough parts of the schedule, the easier parts of the schedule, where the Raiders have to avoid some pitfalls, where they may have to string together some wins before their schedule gets tough. I'll break down the primetime games and what those could look like. Just basically a general schedule review and then my final prediction for their win-loss record for the 2024 season.
Right. Mo's got them winning 4 games, so send letters now. No, I'm just kidding. Make sure you check that out. By the way, again, if you don't have the Bleacher Report app, that's the best way to watch it. Download the Bleacher Report app. If you're at home watching it, get the Bleacher Report. If you have Roku, any of those devices, you can actually download the Bleacher Report app and watch it there too. So you can get Mo, as I sent him the other day when our show came on and I was clicking around my YouTube on my 85-inch TV and boom, there we are. It's like, wow, hey, at 85 inches, we look pretty good. Oh, don't take anything with that. Anyway, so we're
oh gosh,
we're a family show. But anyhow, when we're not a family show, we warn you in advance. So if you're listening in the car with your kids, you're good. I'm not making any crazy jokes. Although there's some funny ones from that roast that I'm using in real life because they were that good. Anyhow, all right. Well, make sure you check out below, whether you're listening to us on audio or video, there's links to Mo's most recent pieces on the Raiders in there, and also a couple that I have as well. So you can get all the stories we talked about today and our latest work you can find there as well. We'll be back Thursday, most likely Thursday. We'll see what happens with schedules because you got to do your Bleacher Report. We got to see when the schedule comes out. If it comes out earlier East Coast time, then we might delay the show a little bit to the evening so that we can do it. And maybe we do a live show if it's later. Mo, we'll figure it out if you're available and we got time. If not, we'll get a show out to you Thursday or Friday with a reaction to the schedule. And Mo will, again, repeat what he predicted as the win-loss record for the Raiders on that one as well. And then you will all hate it. You all hate on him.
I don't understand. Not to tip my hand here, I don't understand how certain early projections have the Raiders as the last place team in the division. The Broncos are basically rebuilding.
Yeah.
They're gonna have a third round, not a third round, but they're gonna have they're gonna have Bo Nix as their starter, who
rookie quarterback
to be a day 2 quarterback, or Jarrett Stidham. Cortland Sutton is not a guarantee to be back. He wants a new contract. They may trade him. Yeah. Their top wide receiver may be Bo Nix's college teammate at Oregon and Troy Franklin.
Yes.
And he's a rookie, 4th round guy. I don't see how the Raiders are last in a lot of these projections.
I think it's the national media loves Sean Payton. That's all it is. I really do.
It has to be.
Because there's no other reason. I know Antonio Pierce, even though he had the 9 games last year, technically a rookie head coach. I get that. So you could say, "Ooh, I'm not sure about how he's going to do." But look what he did last year. And then the quarterback situation. Yeah, the Raiders didn't get a bona fide franchise guy, but we don't know if the Broncos did either. They took a second-round quarterback in the first round, and then they got a first-round quarterback that was a throwaway from the Jets. So their quarterback position is not any more set. In fact, I think there's more unknowns with the Broncos quarterback situation than the Raiders.
I'd rather have Minshew or O'Connell over Nix and Zach Wilson and Jarrett Stidham.
Correct. And so I agree with you there. So I don't see the Broncos. I mean, barring any kind of craziness with injuries or whatever, I don't see the Broncos finishing ahead of the Raiders in any possible way. And I still think, and we'll get to it when we see the schedule, but I still think the Raiders and the Chargers are going to be right there around the same spot. And I think the Raiders have an edge because you talked about it earlier with the offense. So we'll see. But again, the Chargers, the national media loves the Chargers. What are you going to do? All you got to do is go play it, right? What did Antonio Pierce say? Resume on the grass? There you go. Yeah. That's all you got to do. But it's going to be fun to talk about. All right, Mo, I appreciate you, man. We will talk to you on Thursday, all right?
Sounds good.
Okay. For our producer, Mike Robier, for Mo Moten, I'm Scott Branson. This has been Silver and Black Today, an Odyssey Sports original podcast. Do us a favor, subscribe wherever you get your audio, and also hit us up on YouTube. Subscribe to the page there, hit the notifications bell. Until next time. Oh, by the way, we got to quickly mention, don't forget to call us for a show. We already got a bunch of calls, but you can get in, leave a message, 702-900-7869, 702-900-7869. We'd love to have you as a part of the Thursday show. Until Thursday, enjoy your week, Raider Nation, and we will talk to you then. Bye-bye.